This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha. I'm back at you this week with another terrific video story, and you can see the title right on your screen. Cheating fiancé gets demoted to third string backup status. Oh my. Let's get into this story and see what it's all about. And the original poster starts out and she says, "Before telling my story, I'll confess right up front that I am 100% to blame for my current predicament. I was the one who cheated on my boyfriend for no other reason than being selfish. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to call him Harry and call myself Katie. I chose those names as they are my favorite performers." Now she's probably referring to, I'm thinking, Harry Styles and Katy Perry, although there could be other Harry and Katie's out there, I'm sure. We're both 26 and have officially been a couple for 3 years. We had a dreamlike love story, even though our personalities are vastly different. Harry is more right of center, conservative actually, and I'm definitely more left leaning on everything. Now I put up a big caution sign here, and that's because in today's modern society, I don't know if people at the opposite ends of the spectrum can get along. I mean, before, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I probably would say, yeah, it's possible, even though they're vastly different. But today, I just don't see it. He likes to hunt, play cards, and shoot targets, while I like supporting social causes through my social media accounts and volunteering. I'll also confess that bargain clothes shopping is my secret vice. We met at a drag race of all places. He was there with a bunch of his friends, and I was there for an employee outing. We were in line across from each other at the concession stand. I think he sensed I was bored and struck up a conversation with me. Since the line was super long, we had a lot of time to talk. His line moved quicker than mine, so he got up to the window first. When he did, he looked back and asked what I wanted. I told him a Diet Coke, and he ordered it for me. I tried to pay him, but he refused and said it was his treat. I thanked him and told him that was sweet. Harry then said, "You can return the favor by giving me your phone number." I was hoping he'd ask for it, so I gave it to him right away, and he said he'd call me sometime. When he got back to his seat, he texted me and I texted him back. We texted several additional times throughout the races. 4 days later, we went on our first date and fell in love soon after. In our case, it was a situation where opposites were definitely attracted, and the attraction was intense. We became inseparable, save for the times when he and his friends went on their monthly boys' weekends. Now, 2 things I wanted to point out here. First, I put up that caution sign because she's saying they became inseparable. You've got to really be cautious about building your whole life around someone and making them the center of your world. Also, you can see already that she doesn't like him hanging out with his friends, especially going off on these boys' weekends, as she calls it. They've been doing this for the past 5 years and never miss a month. They travel all over the place to hunt and fish, and also like going to Las Vegas to play cards and bet on sports. He told me about these trips shortly after we met, and I didn't have a problem with it at the time. To be honest, though, my hope was he would cut back or stop going on these trips once we became serious, but he didn't. I put up that caution sign because you can see this is a major issue for her, with him going away on these trips and hanging out so much with his friends. He'd always tell me about his travel plans well in advance so I could make plans myself for the time when he was away. Normally on those weekends, I'd either go visit my parents, my sister, or one of my friends. Harry normally would return early Sunday evening and would make it a point to come over and stay the night at my apartment, and he always brought me a little gift every time. Those Sunday evenings, when he returned from one of his trips, were the most passionate and loving times we ever spent together. Back in September, we celebrated our 3-year anniversary. While out to dinner, we had a discussion where we admitted to each other that we were basically unofficially engaged, since we had been completely committed and monogamous since we met. It was then we made a decision to move in together by the end of the year. We thought this would be a good test to see if we were truly compatible living under the same roof. His lease was up at the end of October and mine at the end of the year. We had just signed a lease on a new 2-bedroom apartment in mid-October, and he moved in shortly after, just before his lease expired. The weekend Harry moved was hectic and crazy. All of his friends helped him move his furniture and other stuff, while I, along with 2 of his friends' girlfriends, put stuff away. During the entire weekend, Harry spent most of his time with his friends, while I spent time with the ladies who I barely knew, though we all did go out to dinner Saturday night and to brunch on Sunday. During the next week, I spent Monday through Wednesday with Harry at our new place, getting everything set up like we wanted and slowly moving some of my stuff in. On Thursday, Harry and his friends had a hunting trip planned out of state. I tried to convince him not to go so that we could continue setting up the apartment, but he insisted, as this was their biggest hunting trip of the year. This really upset me, but I didn't show it. He and his friends left on Thursday morning and planned to return on Monday evening. Keep that in mind, folks. That weekend, my parents, sister, and all my close friends already had plans, so I resigned myself to the fact that I would be spending the next 4 days and nights alone until Harry returned. I planned to continue working on the apartment and watching Netflix all by myself. Now, here's where I really messed up. There's a guy, Jason, she says, that works in the same building where I work, that had been casually hitting on me for the past 6 months. Well, if this guy has been hitting on you for 6 months, that's not casually hitting on you. He is overtly hitting on you. I'd run into him down at the little cafeteria in the lobby of our building. He was never obnoxious or anything, but you know how you can tell if a guy wants you? I made it known to him that I had a boyfriend, and he never pushed any further. Well, on that Thursday, I ran into him in the lobby as I was going back up to my office. We chatted for a bit, and he told me that his boss just awarded him front row tickets to see one of my favorite artists. According to him, the tickets were initially for one of their customers, but they had to back out of going at the last minute, so his boss awarded him the tickets because of his job performance. I couldn't believe it. Those tickets originally cost $550, and since the concert was totally sold out, they were going for as high as $3,500 online. I told Jason the artist was one of my favorites, and he asked me to go with him. I hesitated for a moment and then told him I can't, as I was in a relationship. We talked a while longer about the artist and then parted ways to go back to our offices. That night, as I sat alone in our new apartment, I was missing Harry while at the same time thinking about that concert and how much I wanted to go. The next morning at work, I walked down to the cafeteria to get a coffee prior to starting the day and ran into Jason. Here's where I made the big mistake. He told me he still had the extra ticket and asked if I had changed my mind. Instead of saying no like I should have, I instead asked him if I could meet him there, as I couldn't go as his date as I was in a relationship. He said yes, of course. He then told me to wait there in the lobby while he went up to his desk to retrieve the ticket and bring it back to me. He returned a few minutes later, handed me the ticket, and said he'd see me when I got there. On my lunch break, I called Harry to let him know I was going to the concert. I told him another company in our building got tickets and offered them up to our company, and I got one. I said I would be attending along with other coworkers from my company, so she's completely lying to her boyfriend or fiancé, whatever you want to call him. Throughout the year, I attended a number of events for work, so Harry didn't question me about it. He just told me to have fun and to text him when I get to the arena and when I get home. I felt really bad not being totally forthcoming with him, but I knew if I told him who gave me the tickets and who I'd be sitting with, he'd never accept it, even though my only interest was in the tickets and not the guy. Are you sure? As I drove to the venue, I talked to Harry the entire way and sent him several selfies of me at the concert. And the poor guy is off on this hunting trip somewhere and he's saying, "Oh, look, my girlfriend's out with her coworkers and she's having fun. Meanwhile, she's got her date sitting right beside her." I arrived at my seat just before the concert started, leaving a little time for small talk with Jason. It felt awkward being there with him, but I convinced myself it was okay since I was just attending the concert. I was mesmerized and dancing during the entire show and hardly spoke to Jason at all during the performance. He wasn't really into the artist, while I'm definitely a raving fan. It was probably the best concert I ever attended, but unfortunately, I'll only remember the event as being one of the worst decisions of my life. After the concert, Jason asked if I wanted to grab a quick drink with him. I told him I couldn't. I thanked him for giving me the ticket and we walked out of the arena together. When we got outside, he insisted on walking me to my car. Along the way, he asked what my plans were for the weekend. I told him I didn't have any plans and was probably just going to do housework. I asked what he was going to do, and he said he was going to work out both days and then take it easy the rest of the time. He said that after he works out in the morning, he normally stops at a coffee shop to catch up on his email from the week. It just so happens to be the same coffee shop I go to, but I never saw him there before. Is that really a coffee shop that you go to? Or is now that going to be a coffee shop you go to? I told him this and he told me to stop by and say hello if I was in the area tomorrow morning. We got to my car and again I thanked him so much for giving me the ticket and told him how much I enjoyed the concert. It was another awkward moment. There was no kiss, no hug, and not even a handshake. I felt kind of bad as I gave him nothing in return and he had been such a gentleman. As soon as I started driving, I called Harry and told him what a great time I had. Because of the bottleneck getting out of the parking lot, it took me nearly an hour to drive home. Harry and I continued talking the entire time. The next morning, I got up and started working around the apartment, getting things organized and put away. As I was doing so, I started thinking about Jason and how nice he was to me and how I didn't hardly speak to him at all last night, and I started feeling guilty. Around 10 a.m., I decided to go to the coffee shop and see if he was there. My plan was just to drop by to quickly thank him again. I arrived and saw him sitting at a table outside. I went over and greeted him and then went inside to get a coffee and bought him another grande-sized latte. I went back out and sat down and we started chatting. I only planned to stay there for 5 to 10 minutes, just long enough to thank him again for last night. We started talking and quickly found out we had so many common interests. Unlike Harry, Jason's values were almost totally aligned with mine. We ended up sitting there talking for almost 2 hours, after which we walked next door to grab lunch and continued talking there for another 2 hours. I know it was wrong, but I have to admit I was taken in by him and how much we had in common. Now listen to this. She says, he's definitely a guy I would have dated if I wasn't already in a relationship. I should have left things there, but I didn't. Instead, I invited him out to dinner that night so we could continue our discussions. We met at the restaurant at 7, and again we talked throughout the entire meal. We were talking just as friends, but I felt a strong chemistry with him that I just couldn't resist. After we left the restaurant, I didn't want our discussions to end, so I asked if he'd like to continue talking. Well, of course he's going to say yes. He said, sure. Where do you want to go? I told him, why don't we just go to my place as we already spent too much money today eating out. While I knew this was a risk, I didn't plan for things to go the way they did. Now, come on, you're bringing a guy back to your apartment and you didn't expect things to go the way they did. We're not stupid. We know what you were up to and what you planned on happening. As soon as we arrived at my apartment, we talked for about 10 minutes and then started making out. I don't believe you even talked for 10 minutes. I bet as soon as that door opened, you guys were all over each other. I told him about my situation, but he said he didn't care. Unfortunately, neither did I at that point, and we ended up having intimate relations for the rest of the night until we eventually fell asleep. So, man, she forgot about Harry real quick, didn't she? In my mind, I convinced myself this would be a one-time thing and nothing more. After all, Harry was away doing God knows what, so see, she's already trying to justify it, saying, well, I don't know what Harry's doing when he goes on these trips. He could be hooking up with other girls. You see what she's doing here? Now listen to this. Listen to this. The next thing I remember was being wakened out of a deep sleep by Harry's voice saying, good morning, Katie. Being groggy, I didn't immediately remember what happened the previous night and was at first glad to hear Harry's voice. When I opened my eyes, I saw Harry standing in the doorway and I asked him why he was home so early. He shook his head and said, I hope it was worth it, and turned around and walked away. It was then I realized Jason was still lying in bed beside me. I shook him to wake him up, and then I sprang out of the bed wrapped in a sheet and started running out of the room to stop Harry and to explain what happened. As I was doing so, my feet and hands got tangled up in the sheet, and I fell face first onto the floor. When I got up, I realized that I had bitten right through my lip. Jason ran over to me and lifted me up and took me into the bathroom, and we applied towels with direct pressure to stop the bleeding. Once things were stabilized, I told him to leave. He insisted on staying, but I told him to please leave and that yesterday and last night was all a big mistake. He wouldn't leave, so I started yelling at him, telling him he ruined everything and to just get out. So you see how she's passing blame now on this Jason? She's telling him, you ruined my life. No, Katie, you're the one who went out to coffee with him, then to lunch with him, then to dinner with him, and you're the one that brought him home to your apartment. So this is 100% on you because he wasn't in a relationship with your boyfriend. You were. He finally ended up leaving after I kept shouting at him. After he did, I sat on the edge of the tub, applying pressure to my lip and crying. When I looked in the mirror, I could tell it was a deep cut and I really should have stitches. So I went to the urgent care that's close to my apartment. There, I ended up getting 6 stitches. They also gave me a painkiller and put me on a corticosteroid to reduce the swelling. When I got back to my apartment, my face was aching and I was mentally distraught. I tried reaching Harry to apologize and to explain everything, but he didn't answer. I spent the rest of the day at my apartment crying and beating myself up for what I'd done. All the while, I kept trying to contact Harry, but he just ignored my attempts. I really needed to talk to someone, and I couldn't tell my family or friends as I was too embarrassed, so I ended up calling Jason to help me make sense of things. So she's telling us all in this story how, oh, this Jason ruined her life and she's only friends with him and it was a big mistake. But yet now she's calling him to talk through things with him. Unbelievable. I first apologized for putting him in that situation. I then explained that what I did yesterday was wrong and took full responsibility for my actions. I explained to him that I was in love with Harry and wanted to marry him someday. If I was this Jason, I would say, really? Come on. I told Jason I'd like to keep our relationship to being just friends. Well, you've already gone way past friends because we shared so much in common. But we could never be alone again because I was in love with Harry. Jason tried convincing me to break off my relationship with Harry as he wanted us to be together, but I told him no. I said what I did was wrong and I know who I am and I was meant to be Harry's partner. Jason then asked me to consider at least keeping our intimate relationship going as I tried working through things with Harry. So Jason was saying, man, I really liked what we did there last night. Why don't we keep this going and then you can see if you work things out with Harry, and if you do, you can go be with Harry, but in the meantime, you and I could keep hooking up. I told him no, I would never do that to Harry. I explained that our relationship could only consist of cordial conversations whenever we casually bumped into each other and nothing more. That's how I left things with Jason. I ended up taking Monday and Tuesday off to recuperate from my accident and to try making contact with Harry, but he's totally shut me out. Good for you, Harry. The silent treatment is always the best way to go. He's not answering my calls or texts, and I can't blame him. I feel so bad. All I want to do is apologize to him and ask for another chance. I know I'd never hurt him again, and I could prove it if he'd just let me try. Let me know if you think I should keep trying or if I should just give up and try to move on. The problem is, I don't think I can make it without Harry at my side. He's been my rock and my light, and I can't see myself existing in the world without him. So that's the end of her original post. And now we're going to take a look at a few responses she got back from the community. But before we do, I want to encourage you, if you've liked what you've heard so far, make sure you hit that like button right now. That will help get this video seen by people all over the planet. Now, let's take a look at some of those responses. The first one's from a woman. She says, if you are truly sincere about your love for Harry, then I would throw myself at his feet and tell him you will do anything to prove it. At this point, you've totally blown up what you had, so it will take extreme measures to get back to where you were. I cheated on my first boyfriend in college and quickly regretted it. She says, he took me back and I did everything. I mean everything for him. And I thought things were going well, but he suddenly dumped me after 4 months and started dating another woman who he eventually ended up marrying. I realize now that he was the love of my life, and I wish I had taken even more drastic measures to keep him. Now listen to this last part she says. She says, I'll never forget him and still think about him often, even though that all happened years ago, and I've since married and have a great husband and family. So even though this woman now is married, and this is years ago this all happened, and she's got kids and everything, she's still thinking about that guy. So that poor guy that married her was obviously her second choice or her third choice or her fourth choice, who knows. And he's probably thinking, oh, I've got a wonderful wife and family. Meanwhile, this wife is still dreaming about a guy that she did dirty 20 years ago or something. Unbelievable. Next, we have a response from a guy. He says, people on here are not as stupid and gullible as you think. We can see right through your games and manipulation. It's clear you are attracted to this Jason guy, and your plan was to juggle a relationship with him and Harry at the same time, then eventually select the one you want to be with. I've seen women do this before, and I'm ashamed to say I've fallen for it, but never again. Harry would be a fool to take you back, he says. And next we have another response from a woman. She says, regardless of what you are telling us, it's clear from your story you do not love or even desire Harry. The guy who rings your bell is Jason. You should let Harry go to find someone who will be compatible with him, and you should pursue a relationship with Jason. Where I'm afraid you may have hurt your chances with Jason is that you cheated on Harry with him. I know this may seem counterintuitive, but the fact you so quickly had S with him while in a 3-year relationship with Harry conveys to Jason that you are someone who is probably not reliable. Probably not reliable, I would say definitely not reliable. In the back of his mind, I'm sure he's now thinking, if she did this to him, she'll likely do it to me someday. You should address this with him right up front, she says. And then finally, we've got another response from a guy. He says, you're the reason so many men are choosing not to marry these days. So let me get this straight. You're in a 3-year relationship with a guy and talking about spending the rest of your life with him. And then some guy comes and offers you concert tickets and you end up sleeping with him the very next night. Please tell me your post was all a work of fiction. If not, you've got some serious problems to work on, sister. So those were some of the responses she got, and now we're going to take a look at some of the updates that she's given. The first one came 17 days later. She says, I apologize for not giving an update sooner, but as you know, I've had a lot going on in my personal life. Before I start, I want to address something that has come up in a number of the comments I received. I do not love Jason, and have no interest in getting into a relationship with him. While we do have a lot in common and share many of the same interests, he could never mean anything to me as long as Harry exists in the world. Now, if I never met and fell in love with Harry, that might be a different story. What I'm saying here is Harry is my soulmate, and as long as he's alive while I'm alive, he will always be my number one guy. I'll now pick up on things where I last left off. As I said in my original post, I took Monday and Tuesday of that week off to recuperate from my fall and try to get in touch with Harry. Harry blocked my number and changed his status to single on Facebook. I knew when people would see this, they would start asking questions, so I had to get out in front of it. I called my mom and told her about my fall and the stitches. She was worried about me and wanted to come down to spend a few days with me. I told her that wasn't necessary since I was feeling better and the swelling had gone down. She asked if Harry went with me to the urgent care and I told her no. I then explained that her and I were going through a rough patch and hadn't spoken for a few days. I think she has a typo there. I think she meant to say he and I were going through a rough patch and hadn't spoken for a few days. Mom then started asking me 1,000 questions about what was going on. I told her we were working through things and everything would be okay. She and my dad love Harry and have been encouraging us to get married and give them another grandchild. Mom and I talked a bit longer and I thought that was that. But then things took a turn for the worse that evening. Mom called me and started yelling at me, asking why I didn't tell her I cheated on Harry. I asked what she was talking about, and she told me that she called Harry and he told her that he and I were no longer together. She kept asking him why, and he told her to ask me. According to her, she told him that she wasn't going to hang up until he told her the truth. So instead of Harry just maintaining his silence, he instead sent Mom a picture he took of Jason and I in bed together. I didn't know he took the picture and was horrified. The picture is of Jason laying on his back and me laying across his chest with my head just below his chin and my bare back exposed. Like I said, I was horrified and had to tell Mom the truth about why we broke up. Mom spent the next hour yelling at me at the top of her lungs. I couldn't get her to stop and finally had to hang up on her. She called back a couple hours later and we talked through things. Cheating is a real hot button issue for Mom, as she raised me and my 3 siblings to be faithful and trustworthy people and to never cheat. The reason this was such a hot button issue for Mom is that she cheated on Daddy 1 year after they were married with an ex-boyfriend. At the time, my parents were struggling financially, and she admits it was a weak moment for her and the biggest mistake of her life. So I guess you could say the acorn doesn't fall far from the tree. Daddy caught them in the act and made her move out and filed for an annulment. Mom kept begging Dad to give her a second chance, but he kept moving forward with the divorce. Then, like a miracle, a week before the hearing date, Daddy decided to give Mom another chance. That was 33 years ago, and they've since gone on to have a fairy tale marriage with 4 kids and 7 grandchildren. When each of us kids reached an age where we were old enough to understand, Mom sat us down and explained what she did. Well, I have to give the mother credit for doing that. Now, if the mom actually did that and really sat them down and explained she cheated on their father years ago and that it was wrong and to never do that, I give her a lot of credit for doing so. She also pointed out the guy she cheated with to us so that we could see what a big mistake she made. The guy is a complete loser who doesn't work and lives in public housing. He also weighs about 400 pounds now and drives around town on one of those scooters. Ever since she and Daddy reconciled, she has treated him like a king, and he deserves it. He's been a wonderful dad to us, and our mom has been a wonderful mom. None of us can believe what she did, and that's why cheating is such a sensitive subject for her. Now, here's where it gets worse. Mom told me I had to tell my dad what I did. I told her I didn't want to, as I knew it would break his heart and make him think less of me. She said I had to, and that I needed to travel back home to tell him in person. So that weekend, I drove back home to tell Daddy. When he saw me, Dad was concerned about the visible cut on my lip and started asking how I got it, and I told him I just fell down in the bedroom. After explaining that, I told Dad what I did, and he started crying. Then Mom started crying, and I started crying. Dad excused himself from the room while Mom and I sat there crying our eyes out. When Dad returned, he asked me about Harry, and I told him Harry broke up with me, but I was trying to get him back. I then said, I hope he is as forgiving and loving as you are, Dad. What Dad said next shocked me and really hurt Mom. Dad said he would advise Harry not to give me a second chance because the whole process is just too taxing mentally. He said the best thing for us is to go our separate ways and find someone new to make a fresh start. Mom then asked Dad if he was sorry he gave her a second chance. He said, no, you gave me 4 beautiful children. She then said, if I didn't give you children, would you still say the same? And he said, probably not. Hearing this crushed Mom, and she cried for the rest of the day. Later that night, after we ate dinner, Dad explained himself. He told Mom he loves her and wouldn't trade her for anything now, but said that the first 5 or 6 years after she cheated on him were mentally stressful and something that he wouldn't wish on his worst enemy. Mom cried, and they talked for a long time at the table. Thankfully, by the end of the conversation, they kissed and hugged, and everything is back to normal for them. Driving home, I felt so terrible for not only cheating on Harry, but for ripping open an old scar from my parents that I thought had totally healed years ago. I promise you, I have learned a lesson and will never be unfaithful again. For now, I'm going to focus on getting Harry back and proving to him that I can be the loving and trustworthy partner I was before. Well, let me tell you something, Katie. You're never going to be able to prove that. Even if he does take you back, and just like your dad took back your mom, it's never going to be 100% of what it was before. You just have to face that. Now, she comes back with her final update so we can see what happened. And the final update came 3.5 months later. She says, I've come back to close the book on this post and to move on to the next phase of my life. After trying unsuccessfully for 3 months to get Harry to talk to me, I've finally given up. I know what I did to him was inexcusable, and we will both be scarred by my actions for the rest of our lives. But the least he could have done was given me closure. Well, I think you gave yourself closure. When you jumped in the sack with this Jason, you gave the relationship closure, so he doesn't owe you anything more than that. I'm mentally defeated and have been going to counseling for the past 2 months. The counselor told me she believes I am truly sorry and remorseful for my actions, and that I will likely never do again what I did to Harry. She also said that no matter how sincere you are, oftentimes the betrayed partner never sees it in their heart to give the cheating partner closure. This can cause severe mental distress to the cheating partner, which can lead them to do terrible things. I told her I can totally relate to that because that's how I felt since the day Harry caught me cheating. Not that I would ever consider harming myself, but I just don't have motivation to move forward with anything. And some days I don't want to get out of bed. The past few weeks for me have been very difficult as I found out Harry has started dating again. In fact, I've seen him with 2 different women going in and out of his new apartment. Now listen to what she says next. Yes, I will admit that I've been stalking him, but not in an evil way. When I'm feeling really bad, I drive over to his place and sit in the parking lot watching his door from a distance, hoping I can catch a glance of him. Folks, don't do what she's doing. Never stalk an ex. I mean, that is totally unhealthy and downright psychotic. She says, last Saturday I ran into one of Harry's girlfriends at the farmer's market. I asked if she had a few minutes to talk, and we grabbed some apple cider and sat at one of the picnic tables to talk. I, of course, asked her a million questions about Harry. She knew what happened between us as Harry told all his friends, and they, of course, told their girlfriends. She was very guarded in her responses to me, but she did share one thing that pretty much decided things for me. She said that Harry told his friends that he is looking for a girl to marry, and in the meantime, he would be dating a bunch of second-string women for physical pleasure. The two women he's seeing now are both divorced and in their mid-30s, so he's dating some cougars there. He's made it clear to them that they will never be more than FWB type lovers, and they are apparently okay with it. I then ask her if, based on what she knows, if there was a chance he would ever take me back. She just looked at me with a sense of pity on her face and kind of grimaced. I asked her to level with me and just tell me. She said, based on what she knows, there's no way. I then asked what she knows, and she said Harry told his friends that if he ever gets really desperate and none of his second stringers are available, he might consider calling me for a quick fix, but nothing more. I asked her if he said those words, and she said that's what her boyfriend told her. After hearing this, I thanked her and we left. I cried for the rest of the day, realizing my relationship with Harry was broken beyond repair. It was time to move on. My counselor has been working to help me get past this, but it's really hard. Thanks to everyone who read my posts, and especially to those of you who encouraged me throughout this process. So that's the end of her story. Now, for this Harry, I think he handled the situation appropriately. He came home, he caught her in bed with another guy. Instead of acting crazy and getting physical with the guy and potentially getting himself in a bunch of trouble, he just tells her, okay, I hope it was worth it, turns around and heads out the door, and then completely cuts contact with her. That, of course, drives her crazy. It's eating away at her still. But you know what? That's her fault. She needs to pick up the pieces now and move forward. And I'm sure this Harry is going to be just fine. There's going to be plenty of women out there for him. He's in his, mid-20s? He's apparently got a job. He's working. He's doing well for himself, it sounds like. He'll have no problems getting, someone else. And for her, she's in her mid-20s, and I'm sure she's an attractive girl. She'll have no problems getting someone else. But what she needs to do, she needs to be truthful with him right up front and say, the last relationship I was in lasted for 3 years, and we broke up because I cheated on him. Now, will she tell her next beau that? Probably not, but that's what she should do. Now, let's take a look at what I think are the morals of this story. First of all, in today's world, people on opposite sides of the social and political spectrum are nearly incompatible. Like I said, previously I would have told you, yeah, it could work out. It'll be a little awkward, but it could still work out. In today's world, I just don't think it will work. Next, cheating is never just a physical thing with women. Don't believe what they say. There are always emotions involved. Next, and I said this on the last story, mental stress will eventually impact your physical health. Look at this girl's dad. He said for 5 or 6 years after he took his wife back after she cheated on him, he was mentally stressed. Why do you want to live your life like that? Life is too short. Don't stay with someone who betrayed you. Next, the betrayed partner never fully recovers from infidelity. Again, using her dad as an example. 33 years later, you can still see that still eats away at that guy whenever he thinks about it. And that's the way it is when people take someone back who's cheated on them. That's always going to be in the back of their mind. Next, a strong man will never accept any form of cheating. It doesn't matter if it was 1 time, 10 times, 100 times. It doesn't matter if she's emotionally connected to him or not, which I just said that's all bunk because there's always emotions involved. A strong man will never accept any form of cheating. And then finally, as I always say, after cheating occurs, go your separate ways. Focus on your mental, physical, and financial health and move on with your life. So those are my thoughts, and now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story, and how do you think this guy handled the situation? Would you have handled it like he did, or would you have done something completely different? Tell us about it in the comments. Also, be sure to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you